Hi everyone and welcome back to my vlog for Films About Paintings, Spring 2020. And today I will be discussing Andy Warhol and the documentary we watched about him from PBS. And I will be answering the question, Peter Bloom found the soup can paintings complicated in their implication. What do they imply to you? Remember, they look like something worth 27 cents, and Bloom bought them for $1,000 and sold them for $15 million, and they're estimated worth as much as $100 million. And Andy started the first art factory. So, first off, I'm just going to give my, what they imply to me, and then I'm going to kind of do my little bit of analysis on it, and maybe even like I don't know if I would call it irony, but, the interesting look into how Bloom was able to sell something for more money the same way that Andy Warhol, like, painted something that cost, you know, almost nothing, next to nothing, but it was available to the public. But a painting like this of something available to the wide public that was affordable for everybody isn't affordable for everybody. I don't know. Let's talk about it. So I would argue that the work of the Campbell's soup cans implies to me a commentary on the working class and on commerce and how we view product. Because let's be real, product is full of art. Like, someone had to sit down and make like the graphic design for your Life cereal box. Seriously, you know, that is an art, whether we define it as high art, low art, whatever. It's still being sold, it's still being mass produced on top of it too, so it is like a commodity. It's like a whole thing. But I found this website discussing the soup cans, and it's the article is called 32 Short Thoughts about Andy Warhol's Campbell's Soup Can Paintings at the MoMA, and this is by Blake Gopnik from ArtNet News, and he states, Warhol's 32 paintings are working class, but in an older sense. They are the direct product of labor, not purchased, but made. In the language that was de rigueur, it's spelled D-E-R-I-G-E-U-R. In their era, Warhol's paintings are not examples of alienated labor filling the demands of capital. That's what actual assembly line soups are about. But rather, they stand for the honest labor of an artisan filling his own needs, in this case, for avant-garde art. So I guess this is a commentary on the fact that Andy Warhol himself is putting labor into this. It's not a means to dismiss the labor that is made to go into making these soup cans, but it's more so, you know, if he did his labor for this, he physically sat there and painted all 32 of these paintings, who's to say it's not worth anything? Despite, you know, it be depicting a 27-cent soup can. Who's to say that it's not art? And it's a very interesting way to look at the piece, because it's, you know, if I were to look at it and just think, oh yeah, it's soup, that doesn't do justice to anything. The fact that these are soup cans that are accessible to everyone, even the working class, that is a big deal. The working class that is making these cans, they can see what they're doing and see it in this art. But what Blake Gopnik is also mentioning is, like, if we go back to, I can't think of the word, but, like, if we're going back, like he said artisan, but, like, if we're going back to, like, handmade products, which were, you know, a lot of, you know, like, all the little artisan handmade things way back when that were physically handmade by someone, like a woodworker making like a little toy horse or something, you know? It's the same idea here, except Warhol's choosing to paint a soup can, you know? So who's to say it's not worth it if he sat there and did the labor for it? And then why wouldn't it be $1,000 by Bloom, but then he sells it for $15 million and now it's worth like something crazy amount of money, $100 million. So it's a commentary on labor, and it's also a commentary on the value of labor, and I think it is good to put into perspective the fact that there are laborers making these soup cans, literally, and the fact that Warhol was able to sell a painting of them for more. Kind of interesting. From the documentary that we watched, Warhol does, like, he's, like, near the beginning, he's being kind of interviewed by someone, and he's, like, wearing glasses, and he comes off very shy and timid, but he's also kind of blunt. And he's just like, and that's my Andy Warhol impression, I guess. But he says, like, they ask him, you know, like, they're not original, whatever. And he straight up says the reason why he made the Campbell soup, I can't remember if it was about the Campbell soup or the Brillo, but whatever his response was, it's applicable to what we're talking about. But he said that he did this because it gave him something to do, and he knows they're not original. And I think that was a really important part in the film they touched upon, and the fact that they also said that Andy had no idea of what a bourgeois life would be, and it makes sense that he didn't make bourgeois stuff. Like, you know, Campbell soup, and I'm gonna probably say this a couple times, is like the epitome of cheap food to get that anybody can have. And it's the idea that he's taking something that anyone can have and making it high art, which was really cool. And if you look, I'm looking at this article called "The Story of Andy Warhol's Campbell Soup Cans" by Martin Dean, and it talks a little bit about Warhol's inspiration. And he says, as I quote, "Searching for subjects for painting, it was a friend's suggestion that he paint something everybody recognized, like Campbell soup, which gave Warhol his subject. Projections of the cans were traced onto canvas and hand-painted, making this first and original batch of soup cans a work which appeared more uniform and mechanically produced than it really was." That's interesting. I like how they worded that. Between the 32 flavors, there are subtle differences and imperfections, meaning that this really was high art, dwelling on a low, everyday, readily available, or seemingly mundane subject, the very essence of pop art itself. So I like that Martin Dean here says the very essence of pop art itself is because when we think of pop, and I think I've mentioned this in a prior video, you know, you think of Lady Gaga and Ariana Grande and pop music, you know, you don't think of, well, what are popular things in the world? Like, for example, I think right now in the pandemic, the most popular thing is like brands of toilet paper, and I'm waiting for the next artist to make some art out of toilet paper or something once this quarantine is over. But, you know, that's considered pop, right? And if you are taking these everyday objects that are technically popular because everybody has it, everybody can get to it, and turn it into art, there's pop art, right? And so this just kind of goes in mind then with, you know, given that these Campbell soup can paintings were like, the soup cans themselves are 27 cents, Bloom bought them for $1,000, sold them for $50 million, and now they're worth $100 million. That just kind of gives the idea of how I guess, like, what implies to me as someone who's very interested in talking about the working class, you know, and like the ruling class's hegemony over everybody and the idea of money and Marxism, all of that. It's the fact that something's worth really depends on, worth is not necessarily defined by labor, because we're not looking at the actual soup can that like some factory worker probably in the working class is making for the working class, honestly, because that's the cheapest food you can buy that, you know, is a hot food. It's simple to make, simple to heat up. It's the idea that this is now something that is way, way, way overpriced, you know, and it's the idea of like, what labor do we value? And as much as I know there's the starving artist, it's also the idea that we see these Campbell soup cans as like this really expensive thing now, only when they're in the context of high art, pop art, Andy Warhol, you know? So I think it's just a very interesting comment on that. And as much as Andy Warhol's like, oh, I made it because it gave me something to do, blah, blah, blah. I call BS, because I think he was trying to make a comment on the working class and the bourgeois and how that all interacts with one another. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little confusing with this, because I'm trying to make sense of it too, because it is a little bit hard to word. But I see the soup cans as a comment on commerce and just in general on labor. And like, I liked how that first article I mentioned talked about the labor too, because obviously Warhol put labor into making that, but who's to say that the labor being put in to make these soup cans isn't just as valuable, right? So it's all very confusing. I think that last little bit summed it up the best that I could. It's all about money, ultimately, and it's also about how we choose to see what labor deserves more money than another. And I think that is such like a complex idea. And I think it is, and it is in Warhol's Campbell soup cans, no matter what he says in his little PBS interview that he had, in the PBS documentary, or in his little conversation with his friend that he just likes soup, whatever. There's a lot more to the story, at least what I think it is, and how I perceive this painting. But that's pretty much all I have for this week. Stay safe, wash your hands, and have a good day. Thanks for watching.